This is a chat with Kris Bondi, co-founder and CEO of Mimoto, a tech startup using AI to revolutionize cybersecurity. Kris has had a squiggly career path, working in a diverse range of jobs with a diverse range of people. Kris has honed her marketing skills by helping many entrepreneurs go to market, and her experience in consulting came after a short stint in journalism, right at the start of her career. In this conversation, we explore how to run a remote-first company effectively, the buzz of Silicon Valley, the top tip for technical people, and lots more. Enjoy! Okay, so to start off with, let's kind of go back to the beginning of your career in journalism. And you've kind of seemed to have used those skills in your marketing career as well. So what have you learned from journalism all the way back in the day that helped you grow a career in marketing?
I've never claimed to be the smartest person in the room, but I ask really good follow-up questions. And that has really made a difference. So my career in marketing, what was unique about me was being able to understand really complicated technology and to be able to say, oh, so what you're saying is, or is it like this? And so, in fact, I can give you a really quick example. I worked in a semiconductor company, and our CTO was brilliant and had created a protocol that was being used by Nokia and all over the place. And he was explaining how it worked. And I said, oh, is systems on chip, is that similar to data integration? And he said, and it took him 55 minutes because I timed it. It took him 55 minutes in a whiteboard to explain it all to me. And I said, so is that like data integration? And he said, I don't know, I've never done data integration. And I said, okay, well, in this case, Nokia is British American Tobacco and Motorola is Malaysian suppliers and this and this and this. Is it the same thing? And he went, yeah, less than 5 minutes. I think of it as I'm really good at seeing the map we get from here to here, and I can see where it has to go, but I'm not so far on the ground that it's terrestrial and I see all the pieces that have to, I understand what we have to get around, but I don't have to think about how we get around them. That makes sense.
And why do you think that is something that you're particularly good at? Was it because of what you studied at university? Was it your experience?
It was, I think it comes back to the journalism, because you're getting dropped into, I wasn't on what's considered on a beat. I was a stringer, which means that I started when I was in university. And so I would get dropped into, such and such is happening and you need to write about it. And so you need to understand it really quickly. And I went to the University of Pittsburgh, which has a lot of research. And so having to get dropped into that quickly, I think that, I think it's part of it. I think that's part of it. And I think the other thing that came from being a journalist is I really want to understand how things work. It's not just, I want to be able to write about it. I want to actually understand it.
So then you've done so many things in your career. So why did you go away from journalism?
$1, to be quite honest. I had a journalism professor who was quite annoyed that I didn't continue to pursue journalism. But she also was the person who told us how tough it was in journalism, and how when she started, it was in a town with, one traffic light, and how it's even more difficult now. And I was very impressionable at 18 and said, that doesn't sound like a good idea.
Would you think that would have been different, say you started today or 5 years ago, when you could have then used the internet to possibly do a lot of independent journalism?
Possibly, but the reality is I still occasionally dip into it. When I write a blog post, and frankly, I don't write them as often as I should or as I like to, I tend to research more. I'll do blog posts that actually have me quoting news sources. I will say that I also may have peaked early. So I will share with you one of the most impressive things in my career, not impressive like, oh, you've accomplished a lot, but impressive like the highlight of my career started when I was a stringer. And that was, I covered the first time Nelson Mandela gave a speech in the US. And like, I peaked. Like, that's just like, I mean, that was it. Like, how can you be independent and be so like awe-inspiring? And it was before, it was so early that he was still married to Winnie. It was like, he wasn't in government yet. Like, it was just, he had been released recently. And the reason I got to cover it is because I was at the university, and Heinz Corporation is based in Pittsburgh, and they had sponsored his tour. And so the first stop was in Pittsburgh. And so, again, I peaked early. So.
Wow. You mentioned that obviously you went to university at Pittsburgh, but then you quickly moved to San Francisco. And I think at somewhere you sort of said you moved out of Pittsburgh as soon as you realized you could, or something like that. And
I did. I've never actually said that to my parents. So let's see if I share this with them.
I wanted to know, what drew you to San Francisco back then? Do you think there's something about the culture that is particularly good when it comes to creating all these startup companies and creating innovation? And do you still see that as something that is still there today compared to, say, other places in the world where there's also a lot of innovation going
on? So those are two different things, and I'll touch on both of those. I didn't move to do startup companies. I moved because I fell in love with the city. I wanted someplace that was more liberal than where I was. I wanted someplace that was, frankly, friendlier to every type of person, and someplace that was that had some politics to it. And also, I knew, and I can't explain why because I really don't know why, but I knew from a very early age that I wanted to work internationally. And at the time, there was, now we'll just say it's working internationally, but at the time, there was a buildup of saying, the Pacific Rim, the Pacific Rim, the Pacific Rim, and you need to be in California to be able to do business in the Pacific Rim. And so we actually came to California because we had researched 6 cities across the U.S. and we picked San Francisco because our senior year, and I ended up moving out with my partner that I eventually married, but when we had come out, we came out our senior year for spring break. Everyone else went to Cancun and went to beaches, and we went and did informational interviews, which also probably says a lot about, I've always had this approach to life.
And actually, the reason I was interested in talking to you in the first place, when you first met you at State of OpenCon a few weeks ago, is that you say you've done some work in crisis communication for governments.
Yes, I have done crisis work for governments. I've done crisis work across the board. So I've done it for corporations. In governments, it was related to, because now I'm gonna, since this is going out, I'll be more quiet about it. But there was issues around how a certain government's police, it was helping their police train to be able to address crises that were happening, specifically around kidnappings. And so that was, I was brought in as somebody who had, as a foreign expert on how to communicate during those crises in a way that wasn't going to intimidate the communities. I know that was really broad, but it's so that was it was not a U.S. government thing. From some of the other crisis things were Starbucks being protested, as well as I used to do a lot of work for the American Red Cross. So I've done hurricane relief work, and then so that would be on-site work around specifically Hurricane Maryland. I was in the U.S. Virgin Islands for that. And then locally to California, I had responded to refinery emission leaks and fires and things of that sort. It's a good training ground, and it's a really good, if you have that, if if you have a journalism background, it's a really it's skills that transfer quite well to be able to, how do I talk about what I'm talking about without droning on about everything else that's going on around me.
Yeah, and what's the biggest skill or the biggest thing that helps you in crisis communication or helps people in general?
Listening. And the second part of that is listen, pause and think, talk or write. That's the order to be in. For some reason, people don't always go in that order.
And do you think when you communicate in a crisis, how transparent should you be? Because sometimes if you're in a nasty situation, you sort of don't want to say everything at once and sort of overload the people you're trying to communicate to. So how do you manage the degree of sharing of information in these situations?
Sometimes the most effective communication is is the editing process. So crisis communication or overall is never lie. You also don't have to say everything that's in your head. And so it is, what am I going to share in this moment? And part of this goes really down to the, again, going back to the listening and pausing and then speaking. So the other thing is with crisis communication, and again, communication overall, is you most likely are going into it with a, if not an agenda, at least with a, here's the most, especially in crisis, here's the most important parts I need to make sure I get across. And it may be where shelters are, it may be, this wasn't our fault at all, like whatever the thing is that you're trying to communicate. And so that's where it is, you either have them written down or you know what those, like, here's the number one thing I want to say. And then here's the maybe two supporting things I'd also like to get out. But if I get that first thing out, that's the most important thing to get out.
Interesting.
So sort of prioritizing the level of severity of
prioritizing and being really tight about what it is.
Interesting. Perhaps could you just touch on what you think about how things like cyber attacks in particular are communicated? Because Suresh and I were both interested in this for a variety of reasons, but we would like to get your thoughts on that.
Wow, it's funny because now you've hit the one thing that I have trouble shutting up about. And I will be multi-layered with this one. I think that there is, because you said how they're communicated, and there's a lot of cyber attacks. What we don't get enough of is why they happened. And so that's part one of that. I think that there are holes in in our security or assumptions in security that are not always addressed. And so I think that saying this bad thing happened but not saying why is part of the problem. I have a massive issue with people who, when there's something bad that happens, they wring their hands and like, oh, that's so terrible that happened, but then they won't do anything to actually address the why and to fix it. And I have less and less patience for people who will shake their head and say how bad things are, but don't do anything that is to help it, because we're all in this together. And if you don't do your part, then you're useless.
Yeah, it's interesting because sort of on the counter to that, sometimes when something wrong happens, particularly with cybersecurity, it's not always clear why it happened. Sometimes there has to be an investigation, but
there definitely has to be an investigation, but that doesn't get covered. And so it is, and we're now getting to the point where the numbers are so high on what's being breached or what data is being exposed that some people have become numb to it. So in the US, Social Security numbers are what not just every citizen, but some non-citizens also have. And there was a breach that, massive amounts exposed. And you were like, yeah, I just have to, the thing of like, yeah, I just have to assume that everyone has everything about me is a sad starting place.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not accurate. I'm just saying that it's a sad starting place. I do want to come back to your question about innovation, because so I think that the reason San Francisco has been able to be so innovative is the ability to make mistakes and that's not even true of every place in the US. I think there are different areas of why they have thrived. The capital that we can get here helps people be able to make mistakes, it's being able to experiment without the risk of, if you fail, it's okay, is the part of that. So it's being able to experiment. I think that different places have different reasons why they're innovative. Israel has a lot of innovation, and that's because the Israeli culture is very much a culture of asking questions, and being raised from an early age that is to question. And again, if you're being in that situation, you're in a situation where you're asking questions all the time. It's cultivating the imaginative or the inquisitive. And I think that that's helped in both places.
That's very interesting, because at State of OpenCon, we talked to two people, Guy Pajani and Ron Efroni, who are both Israeli. And of course, both have gone on to do some really cool things. And I imagine what you talked about there with this idea of like being able to question anything without, getting shattered or like bombarded with like grief or anger. I think that was clearly very important for both of them, because we discussed that actually in our interviews. But then that kind of also makes me question, for example, your company Mimoto, an AI cybersecurity company. It's remote first. So do you feel like you're missing out on some of this kind of localized culture that you may find in San Francisco, for example? And do you feel like you possibly miss out on the innovation and idea generation that you can get whilst being in person for 50 hours a week?
That's really interesting. I don't, because what we get from being able to be remote is to be able to get best in class no matter where they are. And it is interesting because even though we're remote first, there are currently, as far as employees, there are 8 of us, and we're in 5 states. And when I say 5 states, I don't mean 5 states that are close to each other in some cases. I'm in San Francisco. My co-founder's in Durham, North Carolina. Now, the interesting thing is, Durham, North Carolina Raleigh-Durham's known as the Research Triangle. So it's still a center of excellence for research and innovation. Our senior software engineer, he came out of AWS he was out of AWS and out of CrowdStrike, and he's in Seattle. So again, a place where there was a lot of if not innovation, a lot of forward technology. One of our data scientists is in the northern part of California, and the other data scientist went to school in Berkeley and has now moved to another state. So we have this flexibility of, being able to. We hadn't planned to be around universities. That wasn't we're going to pick up people around universities or centers of excellence. But that's what we've found, is that the people who we've picked have been, or even our QA person, she's by the University of Pittsburgh. And so you have all these people that, and she had by the University of Pittsburgh and had worked at CMU, Carnegie Mellon. So you have being able to get best of breed. I think that coupled with the fact that David and I have both managed people internationally. And so we're used to, it wasn't just a COVID thing. We were used to helping people internationally to be able to work together. We have at least an hour a day where everyone is coding or working on at the same time frame. And we do a few other things to be able to, we use a virtual platform called Gather, which is, to me, looks like a 80s or 90s video game. But everyone has their avatar. And I knew it was working when people in different parts of the country, when they would go to lunch, their avatar would go to the lunchroom. And I was like, okay, like we clearly are like, this is us.
Yeah. So as you said, you get the best talent that you can possibly find anywhere. But then the counter to that, or I guess the flip side to that is, do you think that therefore it may be harder for like a younger person to start their own remote first company and to kind of lead other young people remotely?
It's something we worried about. Originally, we didn't think we could hire people who were fresh out of college, and now we have two. This Gather platform, the reason why it works well is that you can, if you're passing by somebody's desk, your video can go on, or you can talk to them. The audio and the video can go on. So there's a bit of that walking down the hallway, but it is something that we've had to purposely cultivate. We've had one virtual remote offsite, and now we're planning a in-person offsite. And I think that having one or two of those a year is a good way to go. But no, I don't think that you can just hire people remotely and do it and assume it's going to work. There's more effort that has to be put into it, but it's effort that I think like, to give you an idea of, like, when I say like the best of the best, that data scientist that had been at Berkeley and has moved out of state, he didn't know until afterward that his main competition, because we got down to two, was somebody who was a professor. And they had more theory than he did, but when it got down to the practical, he was better than that professor. And that's something that I really commend the lead data scientist for not for going with the quality of the work as opposed to the who has the shiny title already. Back to
your background about how you sort of have a journalist background and a non-technical background. I'm curious to know what things do people who are non-technical like yourself but have worked in technology, what are some things that maybe they miss or they don't get straight away and that they could build on, and vice versa? What are the things that maybe the technical people, the technical founders of companies and people trying to build a business that way, what is something that they could work on, or what do you see them missing?
I'm going to make a slight correction because it's a correction that was made to me. I used to say I was non-technical, and then I had actually in that Israeli company that I worked for, I had told me that I was one of the most technical people he ever met. I'm a non-coder.
Okay.
But I am very technical. Having said that, I think that I'm surprised at times when people are not technical, because to me, software development is if-then statements. And so it's really easy to understand. If you do this, it does that. Could I do it in code? Not well. But not well means pretty much no. But I understand if-then statements. And so for me, it surprises me when I had once somebody who had a career just as long as mine, and they said, you've you work with developer tools and you talk about them a lot, but you don't really understand this. And I was like, how can you not understand what you're working on? And so I always made a point of always trying to be involved with the latest technology and whatever was going to be cutting edge, because I saw that as what the future could be. So that was important. And I think if you don't have that, from a background in your schooling, then I think you need to pursue it. And you pursue it either through reading or through meetups and or from talking to people. And meetups actually is also a good way for going back to the if you're a junior person. I've encouraged our junior people to go to meetups. You're not getting the human touch from us. You should go out and get human touch from others and things that are relevant. So that would be how do you get somebody who hasn't had a technical background become technical or understand technology. On the other side, I think if a technical person wants to eventually be a founder, or even just wants the ability to take more of a center stage, and not everyone wants to, but if you do, writing is absolutely the most important thing, without a doubt. Writing is a technical person that could write like that throughout my career, like the best thing.
Writing what in particular?
I almost don't care. Writing well.
Anything but code.
Just writing well. So, or being able to explain what they've done in writing is fantastic. But honestly, just being able to communicate is incredibly important.
Yes, and do you think that is a skill that's actually quite rare to come across a technical person who is good at that skill?
Yes. Okay. I will try not to be offensive when I'm going to tell you this story. I worked in a company where I had an intern who was, she was a freshman. She was going into being a freshman in college. So she was very green. And the organization had a great program where they would have leads of different departments come in and talk to the interns. And so the summer interns, so we did that first one, and the first one that I was involved with, and it was obviously marketing. And afterwards I'd said to her, it's like, I was surprised did you have any questions? Like, you didn't say anything. She says, like, there was people from MIT, they're doctorate students for MIT and Cal, and oh my God, I had no idea. And I said, here's the thing, you're not going to believe me now, but at some point in the future, you're going to be at a dinner party and you're going to say, he's an engineer, but he can actually talk really well. I said, and that will be a compliment. Like, you will mean that. Like, he's really technical, but he can also talk. And that is, maybe a little bit of exaggeration, but and I'm going to give a plug for the University of Pittsburgh, because a few years ago, they created a program that was a dual major that was computer science and English. And and they did that because of that exact thing that I was talking about, because if you want to have a career and you're going to code all the time and that's going to be a career, that's perfect. That's a perfect career for you. But if you want to move over into management, or if you want to move over into more of a center stage, that ability to communicate is really important. And also the other thing is knowing what your type of communication. For as much as I talk, what I'm going back to the journalism, I'm much more comfortable as a writer.
You have been on many leadership teams, and what's your philosophy for leadership, of fostering a good team, of recruiting the right people to become successful?
I think, again, similar to that, what you edit out, it's not bad to have stars, but if you but you can't cut corners or give them a break because they're a store. So basically what it comes down to is respect has to be the corner of everything. And if you have, he's a fantastic sales guy, like kind of difficult to be around, but he's a fantastic sales guy, then he shouldn't be that will destroy the leadership team. The other part of it is I don't know how much this still goes around, but there were teams that I came into where there was a CEO who thought that it was good that sales and marketing were, having them have a contentious relationship, like, that gets them to be much better. They're both, no, really, it just makes them not work well together. So I think that finding people who all match your company culture is a good starting place. And then everyone being aligned on goals. But it really is going to come down to how much you are, how much you're respecting, because at some point you're not going to agree with each other. And so it really helps that you respect the other person when you're telling them that you think they're flat out wrong on their beliefs.
Interesting. Have you heard of Alex Hermosi? The one, like a big entrepreneur. He started off in gyms.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I recently watched a video a few weeks or months ago. And it was him and his girlfriend, or maybe wife, who are both really good entrepreneurs. And it was like an Ask Me Anything. And one of the questions was, how do you two foster a good relationship between you? And what I find extremely interesting was that his number one thing was not like love or anything like that. It was respect. As long as you respect each other, you will pretty much always be happy to be together. And it's fascinating to see you also agree that respect works in the business world as well.
Oh, it is. So our company value, we only have one, and it's respect, because it's the cornerstone for everything. It's how the team interacts. It's how we talk with our customers. It's how we talk with developers. It is, everything comes from that. I've been too many places, well, maybe not too many, but I've been places where there's lofty things of, our values are going to be, and there's all this talk about, and then there's these long things, and it's, now okay, anyone in this room, can you name the 16 company value? It's like,
yeah,
it's one thing.
Yeah, I know Amazon has a huge list of values, and before your interview, you have to just memorize all of those values and pretend like you agree with like all of them.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Yeah. I don't want anyone to ever have to pretend. And if they do have to pretend that they respect other people, we have a problem.
Yeah.
So do you see that, do you think that's easier in sort of startups and smaller companies where there isn't so much of a bureaucracy? Because, with big companies, you have all these values, they have, shareholder values, all these values. Do you think it gets lost somewhere as you grow?
I hope not. I've had this debate with somebody. I don't think it has to. I'm going to say, why don't we watch my journey and see if we can keep it together? Because I don't think it has to be lost. Because frankly, you need to respect your shareholders also. I mean, so it's a debate that I've had with people about, it's similar to giving a break to, the jerk salesperson, because they, there's a misconception that, there are people who they shine, and so you need to give them a break. And what studies have found is that when you do that, part of the reason they're shining is because they mess with everyone else's productivity so much that before they came, everyone else goes down in their productivity or goes down in their quality because it's so difficult to work with that person. So I will come back to me in 5 years and we'll find out if I'm right or if I'm totally wrong.
And in your career, you've kind of worked with lots of startups and seen lots of different entrepreneurs do their thing. And, statistically, most people do fail, at least on the first or second thing they try. And what are the biggest reasons that you see for them failing? And why won't Mimoto fail?
I think that there's several reasons why people fail. They fail because nobody wants to buy what they have. So it's really important to check the market beforehand. And when I say check the market, I mean like do an actual analysis of the market beforehand. The other thing is, I think that sometimes people fail because they're undercapitalized or they're overcapitalized. They have too much money, and so they don't, they don't spend it wisely. They spend without thinking. And then the other capitalized is you don't have, you're spending to survive and not to grow. The other part is that a lot of times there is a lot of times it's technical founders who don't have a go-to-market background, and they're incredibly bright people, but they don't know this area and either don't give it proper respect, or people are giving them advice who also don't have that background. Go-to-market this is controversial among startup companies, but I believe very strongly that go-to-market is actually easy if you know what you're doing, and it's incredibly expensive if you don't. Because the most important thing is to know how to run experiments and know what you should be measuring, and then being able to move quickly. So when you ask why Mimoto won't fail, I think that the ideal startup has 3 levels to it. And the building level, you need somebody who has a vision of not only how to fix things, but also has the engineering ability to be able to not just build themselves, but to have a team build, and to be able to see beyond it. Like, think of it as the foreman of the foreman of the city instead of the foreman of the site. And that very much is what my co-founder is. And so that's at that terrestrial level. And then you have somebody at a helicopter level. And the helicopter level is usually a product person who is seeing how these all fit together. So you have what we're building and how it fits in with these different things, and and what that's going to mean to customers. And then you have somebody like me who's at a satellite level. And it's my job to see beyond the horizon about where things are going from a business perspective, and to understand what's happening on those different levels, but not to have to know how to build it at a terrestrial level. Why we'll be successful? Because I think most companies don't have that. Most companies will be at that foreman level, or they'll have potentially the product level and that, but they're not seeing the beyond the horizon part. And that's the part that I bring to the table. I have the go-to-market background, which is incredibly helpful, obviously, but it is seeing where things are going.
How can you see where things are going? How do you see beyond the horizon?
So I used to work a lot with analysts. So it's going back to, it's reading and talking and getting beyond the hype, for lack of a better way of saying that. It's not just, and it's asking, this is really cool, but how does this fit in with, figuring out if a cool technology is going to be a commodity, and figuring out why it won't be a commodity, or figuring out where, again, the problems you're solving instead of the really cool thing. So that's the thing that I've, part of it is, I could just say, that's what I've done all this time, is that I used to come into companies that had really cool technology, but maybe hadn't quite taken off. And it was my job to have them take off quickly. So it is that, so looking at what's beyond the horizon, part of it is talking to analysts. Part of it is, again, a lot of reading about the research about where things are going. So, an area that fascinates me that has nothing to do with my company is quantum. Fascinates me. And it fascinates me in part because I've hit something I don't understand. And it's exciting that I don't understand it. I can understand AI. Math I cannot understand, but I can understand how it works. And I can understand where AI can go and what we can do. And when we get to LLMs being able to predict intent, that's coming. like that. And that's part of me not just reading, but that's me having conversations with people like my co-founder and different people who are who have that deep technology expertise. And so, you put that together, and then you also have those same conversations on the business side. I'm very passionate about this.
And that brings me on nicely to, you said come back to you in 5 years' time. So where do you see yourself and Mimoto in 5 years' time? What's your vision, and what are your aims?
We're solving a problem. We're not the only one solving the problem. I believe that there needs to be an element of security that is person-based. And so, we'll say 5 years, since I said that, 5 years time, give or take, we have more companies that are approaching it that way. I think that security today needs to be assessed on, is it adaptive and dynamic? Is it real time? And is it contextual? And I think that that's something you get from things that are person-based. I think that 5 years time, there are more companies that are all along the way are doing things that are person-based. Where Mimoto is we will be the leader in that. And not just a leader in it's a company you want to go to, but it is the company you want to build into your products. And it's a company that is leading others to, and frankly, me being at times annoying about how many times I bring up the fact of where the holes are. I bring it up because I bring it up because I think that I want other people addressing the holes. So my hope is that 5 years time, overall, we are more prepared for what's coming at us. And that Mimoto has been a big part of that.
Awesome. And if people are interested in you, your work, or even just entrepreneurship and marketing, where should they go?
I have a Substack called The Fork in the Road, which again, I promise I'll write more. LinkedIn, getting my name spelled right is probably a good starting point. It's KrisBondi. And then Mimoto is MIMOTO.IA. Mimoto means identity in Japanese. So, it all comes back to the person. So I think that if you want to just hear me talk or write and you don't want to have me talk about Mimoto at all, the Substack, I try to not actually talk about my company. I complain about security, but I don't actually name my company.
Yeah, I read your article on MFA, or your contribution to the MFA article. But anyway, thank you for that conversation. We really enjoyed it because you touched on a lot of areas that are useful to me and Quan right now, and things that we are kind of actively thinking about.
Thank you very much for your time. We really enjoyed it, as Suresh said.
Great. Thank you so much. This
Thank
is very
you. Cheers.
enjoyable.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the conversation, please like and subscribe to Wafflebite. You can find out more about Kris and Mimoto AI through the QR code on screen or the links in the description down below. Bye.